How good is that song? Classic! Fellas, it's opening day. This is exciting. Spring is in the air. This magic moment. Max Kellerman, Stephen A. Smith. I'm Molly Karen Rowe.
I'm just saying, that's a classic.
What's
Molly
wrong?
and the classic. I wasn't aware that Molly got down with the classics like that. I wasn't aware of that.
For
I wasn't
sure.
aware of that.
Yes,
Okay.
bringing me back. Yes,
Like the look, by the way.
yes.
Like the look. The black is slamming.
Thank
It looks
you.
very, very nice. Very nice.
Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. Guys, let's get it. We'll get to baseball. Obviously, opening day. That's exciting. Jessica Mendoza will be with us later to help us preview it. But we're going to start with some hoops out there in the wild, wild west. And it just keeps getting wilder, fellas. So now that the NBA trade deadline is come and gone, let's take a look at the standings. The Jazz, who dealt with a major scare on Tuesday. Did you see this? An emergency landing. Thank God everyone is safe. But the players were certainly shook up, followed by the Suns. The Clippers, who recently acquired playoff Rondo. The Lakers, who scooped up Andre Drummond, who dealt with a toe issue last night. Toenail, that is. And lastly, the Denver Nuggets. And oh, by the way, Luka, he went off on Boston, putting up 36, 8, and 5, doing all sorts of Luka Doncic things. Stephen A., who's the biggest threat to the Lakers at this point?
I'm incredibly impressed with a lot of things going on in the Western Conference, especially with the Phoenix Suns, and obviously the Los Angeles Clippers have come on strong. But my answer to this question is going to be the Utah Jazz, Max Kellerman. They're a top 5 defensive team in the National Basketball Association. They are top 3 offensively. They are top 2 shooting the ball from 3 and number 1 in attempts. And then when you take into account the fact that Rudy Gobert always in line for Defensive Player of the Year because it's his prowess on the defensive end of the floor, you combine that with Royce O'Neal defending you on the perimeter. You've got interior defense. You've got defense on the perimeter. And then on top of it all, you've got 6 different dudes all averaging in double figures. You look at the Utah Jazz, they are incredibly formidable. Make no mistake about it. Obviously, when you think about the Lakers, they're the Goliath, especially with Andre Drummond there. If Anthony Davis and LeBron James comes back, who's going to be able to deal with that front line? The answer would be no one in my estimation. But if there's somebody that has a shot, it's somebody that can play elite defense combined with being able to launch from long range. And the Utah Jazz have shown that they're getting that in droves. And oh, by the way, as far as I'm concerned, they have a leading contender for 6th Man of the Year in Jordan Clarkson.
Yeah.
Their coaching staff is doing an outstanding job led by Quinn Snyder. I'm looking at the Utah Jazz right now as the number 1 threat to the Los Angeles Lakers in the Western Conference.
This is a debate show, so everybody knows. I'm about to tell you you're wrong. But before I do, let me say that what they just went through last night.
Yeah, that's some scary stuff. I know I'd be scared as hell.
They thought that was it.
Wow.
You listen to the players, they're talking about, they were talking to each other like, yo, this might be it. This might be the end. They thought they were going to die on that plane. Land the plane. Spider Mitchell doesn't get back onto another plane and go to the game. I think I'm with him, actually.
Yes, right.
But these dudes...
He did not.
Did not. These dudes go and play and win.
Yeah.
After something like that, that tells me a lot about their character, actually. The fact that they're able to do it, especially when John Morant's going off the way it was a good game. They're not the biggest threat to the Lakers. They are a threat. They're not the biggest threat, and I'll tell you why. They didn't do anything at the deadline to really make themselves better. You know who did? The Clippers and the Nuggets. And let me tell you something about the Clippers and the Nuggets. I'll start with Denver, and I'm going to go to the Clippers next. Denver and Utah had one of the best opening round series you will ever see in any sport. And when we think about Denver right now, we don't really think about Jamal Murray with Donovan Mitchell and, let's say, Devin Booker, right? He's not quite as good as those guys until it matters most. Then he's every bit as good as those guys. Then he's an all-time great, at least he was last year. They have an MVP caliber player when it comes postseason time in Jamal Murray. We already know Jokic is. We see what Porter Jr. is doing. My God, the way he's shooting the ball, the way he's been scoring. And now you add Aaron Gordon to the mix. See, they didn't just add a little player that doesn't mean anything. They added a big, athletic, forward, in his prime, who now has to worry about being the 3rd or 4th best player on the team.
So your answer is the Denver Nuggets?
I'm saying that's 1. I think Denver has actually come playoff time.
Who is the threat, Max Kellerman? What the hell you giving me? I didn't ask you for a list.
The
I need
Los
one
Angeles Clippers.
Okay.
The Los Angeles Clippers are the biggest threat to the Lakers.
Because?
You made the argument the other day, Rondo. I said it would be a marginal improvement, but that marginal improvement can be profound in the playoffs. They went to a Game 7 that they were up 3-1 against the Denver team I just told you about. And it took an historically bad game by Paul George and Kawhi Leonard in order for Denver to squeak by. Now they have the floor general on this team. When you look at how deep the Clippers go, they got 11 dudes, 11, who can really play. They have guys not just like, Kawhi and Paul George, not just like Rondo, but Batum and Ibaka and Zubac and Reggie Jackson and 3 or 4 guys I'm not even thinking about right now. They are legitimately 11 deep. Your boy Luke Kennard, I know you didn't love that sham for Kennard. Kennard's shooting almost 50% from 3.
I don't care. I don't care. You got to shoot more then. You got to shoot more then. I mean, you can't be taking
got 11 dudes.
I'm just saying, if you taking 8 shots a game, right, but you making 50% of your threes, why the hell ain't you shooting more? You got to get him more opportunities. He has to be a factor. I'm not saying that it doesn't matter that he makes threes. I'm saying it only doesn't matter if you don't take enough of them. And that's what he needs to do, especially since you were willing to part ways with Lou Williams. There's no question that in large part that had something to do with Luke Kennard and how comfortable you're feeling with them. Lou Williams, you talk about a perennial 6th man of the year, and you ship him out. It was never the same since Ty Lue became the coach there. Lou Williams' minutes diminished. He didn't seem as aggressive and as involved and as much of a focus offensively for the Clippers. That's because of Luke Kennard. I got to see Luke Kennard jack up some more shots and take over games offensively the way I've seen Lou Williams do in the past before I'm sold on his arrival in Los Angeles with the Clippers.
I know that the Clippers were that close to getting by Denver and giving you the confrontation you wanted to see with the Lakers in the conference finals.
And I'm still holding it against them.
And one of the reasons I believe the Lakers won the championship the first year they come together, because usually super teams, it takes like at least a season, was Rondo. Playoff Rondo is real. So they had 2 guys in the regular season, and in the postseason, they had 3 All-Stars and another floor general to go with LeBron James. That dude's on the Clippers now.
Well, you know what a lot of people miss about Rondo, to make your point, to accentuate your point, is this. When they talk about playoff Rondo, people keep thinking, the playoffs arrived, so he steps his game up. It's not that simple. What happens is that it's a best 4 of 7. So now you get to focus on one team.
Right.
That brilliant savant of a basketball player, Rajon Rondo, you put him against the same team, best 4 out of 7. He has the ability to figure you out.
It's going to get worse and worse for you.
It's going to get worse and worse.
That's why they say
that's really what it is.
Playoff time is coach's time.
Right.
Plays out of time. Who knows all the plays? Rondo knows. He's a coach on the floor. That is exactly what the Clippers were missing. They got shooting. They have size.
Yeah.
They have every single thing they need. The question is, will Paul George step up? Because Kawhi ain't choking again in the game.
But I can point this to you. You remember what you saw from Donovan Mitchell.
Oh, yeah.
And that brother has arrived. And when you take into account the fact that you have surrounded him with depth, defense, and perimeter shooting,
it's a whole lot.
Utah. And by the way, come playoff time, you can expect crowds to be there. Maybe not at full capacity that the MLB is talking about doing opening day with the Rangers, but you can expect the crowd. Utah is not an easy place to play for anybody.
The West is so gangster this year, we didn't even mention Dallas or Phoenix. Phoenix didn't lose in the bubble, and they're on fire.
I mentioned Phoenix at the start. I didn't mention Dallas because I'm not sold on Porzingis.
That's a conversation for another day.
You mentioned opening day with the Rangers, Stephen A. We have sound from our president, Joe Biden. We'll play that a little bit later and react to that. The Lakers have the 3rd toughest remaining schedule. They say the West Coast is the best coast, fellas, but we're all from the East Coast, and that is in 25, below 500, losing 7 of their last 10. Stephen A., what is going on? Do you think Brad Stevens' job needs to be in jeopardy at this point?
Yes, I do. I do think it needs to be in jeopardy. I am not saying that you fire Brad Stevens today. That is not what I'm implying. I like the man personally. I think he knows basketball. I don't think his team is unprepared. What I do believe, and this is just based on my experience as a journalist covering sports for the last 27 years, I can tell when you don't seem to have the pulse of your team. We got to understand something, that when you're talking sports, particularly the sport of basketball, Larry Brown, the great Larry Brown, who I'm hoping ends up in Indiana with my brother Mike Woodson, who just became the head coach for the Indiana Hoosiers.
Yeah, that's right. Congratulations, Mike Woodson.
Last time the Knicks won a division title, he was their head coach.
And then gone for some reason.
How about that? Here's the deal. When you look at Brad Stevens, who's won 55.7% of his games as head coach of the Boston Celtics and has taken them to the conference finals on at least 3 occasions actually, here's what we have to pay attention to. You look at players like Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, you know they ain't going anywhere. These brothers can play. And they only 22 and 24 respectively. They ain't going anywhere, okay? Kemba Walker, obviously his health has been compromised to some degree. There's something missing there right now. You could say the same with Marcus Smart to a lesser degree, but I don't know if that's an issue. When I look at the Boston Celtics and I look at Coach Stevens, there does come a point in time where do they hear you? Are you able to peel, max potential out of them? Whatever they got inside of them, are you able to pull it out? There are times when you look at a coach and you say, X and O's wise, do you know what you're doing? Are you making the right decisions during game time, stuff like that? But I don't question any of that with Brad Stevens. What I see is a guy that's talking to the players, and the players are just not listening. They're not necessarily buying in. And that's what you have to pay attention to. They're going to do their jobs. They're going to be professional. There's not a shortage of effort or anything like that. But I'm talking about the kind of coach like Pat Riley. You hear the stories about Pat Riley. Pat Riley once dug his head underwater in a bucket, an ice bucket, and put his head under there. Everybody thought he was going to kill himself or whatever because of how long he stayed there. Damn near losing his breath and dug his head out of there. This is what it takes. This is the kind of adversity you got to pull yourself up. That's just one thing. There's several coaches who have won that find a way to do things.
I have a question about what you're saying. So just for clarification.
Sure.
Are you saying that Brad Stevens, after a while, a dude spends enough time in a situation,
Yes.
it becomes white noise?
Yes.
No pun intended.
Yes.
Right? Or are you saying he's not a good enough motivator?
No, I'm saying the former. I'm saying it just becomes white noise, to use your phrase. That's what it is. And when you got players that young, you got to get Danny Ainge got to get veterans around them. That'll help. But you, as a coach, knowing what you're working with, you've got to be able to make sure that it ain't just noise to them. And Brad Stevens this year doesn't strike me to be that guy. So, again, I'm not advocating that the man not be a head coach, that he's not a worthy head coach in the NBA, that he wouldn't do a good job for a lot of different teams, because he's done a good job on Boston. But based on the personnel you have, the fact that they're not going anywhere, it's perceived. I interviewed Jason Tatum on SportsCenter, my NBA show SportsCenter with Stephen A. And Jason Tatum put it on himself and the players. He said, it's our job. But the bottom line is, if you're the coach, what are you there for if you can't peel that out of them? And I don't see that in Brad Stevens. And that's why I think if things continue to go this way, Danny Ainge is going to need to move in a different direction.
They have some dispiriting losses this year where and Coach mentioned it. Brad Stevens mentioned it after the game.
Yeah.
Whenever the adversity is going to come. Basketball's a game of runs. What are you going to do when it comes? Celtics fold, right?
Yeah.
Coach can't give you heart. He can put you in a better position to win. I think Brad Stevens, people should have their eye on Brad Stevens. People should have their eye on Danny Ainge. The same way I go after Brian Cashman as Yankees GM. Excellent GM. But not the best in baseball. Why don't the Yankees have the best one in baseball? If I'm a Celtics fan with their tradition, I'm going, yeah, Ainge is really good, but their guy's better than him. Why don't we have one of those guys? I like the best GM. He's won one championship as a GM, and it was in a league where there were no other super teams. He had a super team, won one season.
Yeah.
So I think Ainge deserves responsibility. So does Brad Stevens. So do the players. Now, Stevens has to put him in a better position. But let me tell you something about the way this roster is constructed. Their best shooters, the guys you want catching shooting, don't get to take easy shots like that. Because all three guys, Kemba and Tatum and Brown, create their own shots and then shoot, right? Including from the outside. So they're constantly, all three of them, playing a kind of ISO basketball where they have to take and hit difficult shots. That is on the coach. That is also on the construction of the roster. So you got to look at Danny Ainge, too. And take it a step further. They got talent on this team. It's not a bad team in terms of talent. It's not amazing. It's not overwhelming. there are teams in the East with more talent than them. I'm looking at Ainge every bit as much as I'm looking at Coach.
Well, here's why I don't look at him every bit as much. Even though he deserves some culpability, make no mistake about it. He's also the guy that hired Brad Stevens, who was doing a good job for the most part in his career. He drafted Jason Tatum, pulled off the heist with Philadelphia.
He's good GM.
Switching picks. He's a damn good executive. We got to give credit where credit is due in that regard. Here's the important part that I think we have to pay attention to, though. When you look at the players themselves, again, you've got young players. You got a coach. Remember, Pat Riley, Stan Van Gundy had taken the Miami Heat to the Eastern Conference Finals. The very next year, being the intense Stan that he is, no one would question Stan Van Gundy's basketball acumen. But Pat Riley looked at his personnel, Shaquille O'Neal, a young Dwayne Wade, Alonzo Mourning and those boys, and Pat Riley said, you got to go. I got to coach this team and coach them to the championship. Dwayne Wade last 4 games against Dallas, averaging 37.
Michael Jordan.
I mean, it was unreal. But the point is, that's what you have to do sometimes. Not that that's the case here with this squad, because Pat Riley looked at this championship squad, knew he had enough. They just needed to have the right pulse, touched. In this case, that may not be the case with Boston. But in the end, when we look at Brad Stevens, it's your job as a coach to make sure you got the pulse of your team. And when I look at him, and especially during timeouts and I'm watching, just look at the guys. He's got their heads down.
They got bad body language in the second half of games.
They're not feeling him. They're not feeling him.
But see, to me,
he's not taking on no motivation.
You'll feel Coach a lot better if he puts you in a position to win. If you want to criticize him and say, look, you have talent, you're not using them well enough, okay. There's too much ISO ball, okay. That's really where the body language comes from. But I'm, again, looking at the roster. It's not like they're surrounded by catch-and-shoot guys, Stephen A. And Let's be honest. Tatum and Brown are both excellent. I think inside Tatum somewhere is a first option on a championship contender. Yeah. Are they quite as good as the other superstars in the East? Are they as good as either one of those guys, as Embiid, as Antetokounmpo, as Harden or KD?
I would remind you, the Boston Celtics swept the Sixers in the playoffs last year, even though Ben Simmons went down. Okay, they were in the conference finals. We see what it is. You just get to a point where you've been around long enough and suddenly your motivational techniques don't work any longer. The players appear to be tuning you out. They're looking for their numbers because they look at themselves and don't expect to go but so far.
That's something.
But don't expect to go but so far.
But they're professionals, too.
No, they're going to go out there. I'm not accusing them of not caring at all. Please don't get me wrong.
But I'm saying it can't just be on the coach. They're still professionals.
It's not just on the coach, but the players got the guaranteed contracts, and they ain't going anywhere not with those contracts and not with their youth. So you have to make a change, and you have to make a change with somebody that can literally motivate them at a very high level. That does not appear to be Brad Stevens right now. It just doesn't. I'm just telling you what I see.
Boston's made it to the – no, that's fair. Boston's made it to the conference finals 3 times under Stevens. But obviously, they haven't been to the finals now in a decade. Speaking of Boston, or the New England area for that matter, to the NFL we go next. Fellas, Robert Kraft making some interesting comments about the Patriots quarterback situation. Find out who should feel called out by the Pats.